clip that's been floating around. Roger Stone. Roger Stone, I'm sure you're familiar with who Roger Stone is. Roger Stone is, figure was tied to Donald Trump, etc. He's got a YouTube show. It's kind of a Fox News conservative Trump supporting YouTube show. And on his YouTube show, he recently had a guy named Trevor Loudon. Trevor Loudon writes for the Epoch Times. Trevor Loudon is a crazy anti-communist who writes for KeyWiki. KeyWiki is this crazy website that tracks leftists and communists. It's pretty nuts. But anyway, so he had Trevor Loudon on his show. Roger Stone did. And Roger Stone was interviewing Trevor Loudon. And Trevor Loudon, this Epoch Times writer, the guy who runs KeyWiki, this is what he said. This is not a doctored clip. This is verbatim. This is exactly the 30 seconds from the show. This is what he said, folks. You can't make this up. Truth is stranger than fiction, as they say. This is what he said.
Really there to promote Russian and North Korean foreign policies. She may not understand that, but she's being used by people like Dennis.
Let's start again. Let me explain the context. He's talking about Tulsi Gabbard, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, the former Hawaii Congresswoman who's now on Fox News a lot, the anti-war presidential candidate, Tulsi Gabbard, who just quit the Democratic Party and is moving into Republican circles now. She's not joined the Republican Party. She's a Democrat. He's talking about Tulsi Gabbard. This is Trevor Loudon talking about Tulsi Gabbard.
Really there to promote Russian and North Korean foreign policies. She may not understand that, but she's being used by people like Dennis Kucinich and others to do that. She also has some connections to the Center for Political Innovation, which is a very pro-Russian outfit run by a man called Caleb Maupin, who used to be in the Workers' World Party. She's on the...
Did you hear that? Did you hear that? Let's play that one more time. It just doesn't get better than this.
Which is a very pro... She also has some connections to the Center for Political Innovation, which is a very pro-Russian outfit run by a man called Caleb Maupin, who used to be in the Workers' World Party.
Now, hey, I'll take it. Look, I at first, when I first heard about this, people were tweeting at me about it. And then when I first saw the clip, I thought, okay, let's make a joke out of it, right? I was thinking I would do the whole thing like, oh yes, Tulsi Gabbard calls me up every night to get her instructions from the Kremlin or instructions from North Korea, and it's like I was making a joke like I'm a secret controller of Tulsi Gabbard, blah, blah, blah. I was going to have fun with this, just kind of laugh about it the way we like to laugh about Russiagate and stuff like that. But, I thought, why do that? Because honestly, I have met Tulsi Gabbard once in my life. And, who's to say she's not influenced by what we do here? She could be watching right now for all we know, right? I mean, who's to say she's not watching right now? I know for a fact that what we do on these streams, it has a bit of impact. For example, I know for a fact that Kamala Harris's staff has a copy of my book. I wrote a book a couple of years back called Kamala Harris and the Future of America, in which I analyzed Kamala Harris. I used her to make 3 different points about politics in America. I got into her background, the issue that she has with her father, what it means to be a socialist in the United States, how she could grow up in Berkeley and left-wing circles in order to, from there become this vicious prosecutor who destroyed people's lives and, fed the mass incarceration machine in the 90s. I went into great detail about Kamala Harris. I wrote this book about it. Well, I know for a fact, it has been brought to my attention that Kamala Harris's staff has a copy of the book. So, is it a shocker to think that Tulsi Gabbard might listen to something I have to say? I mean, I don't think that's far out. I don't personally direct Tulsi Gabbard. I don't personally interact with her. But there is a wing of politics in the United States that's emerging. Jimmy Dore, other folks that are anti-war, anti-imperialist. They don't buy into Russiagate. They want to free Julian Assange. They generally like Bernie Sanders' kind of economic policies, healthcare and jobs and education. But at the same time, they are focused on anti-imperialism. They see it as fighting the global system of monopoly capitalism. Tulsi Gabbard tends to be the one in politics who speaks to people who are putting out the kind of things that we put out. The circles that we run in are the Tulsi Gabbard circles. So is it possible that, that I have influenced Tulsi Gabbard to some degree or other? Sure. Not intentional. It's not like I went to her and knocked on her door and said, Tulsi, you got to listen to me. You got to hear this. No, and in my book, Kamala Harris and the Future of America, I actually talked about Tulsi Gabbard's epic takedown of Kamala Harris and why it was that Tulsi Gabbard used her limited time on the debate stage, because they did not let her talk. I mean, they did not treat her as a serious candidate when she ran. She had very limited time on the debate stage. But why did she use her limited time on the debate stage to go after Kamala Harris? And I talked about how there is a rivalry in the deep state, and that, that Tulsi Gabbard is tied to a wing of the U.S. military that is more anti-war. Right? You got to remember Michael Flynn. Do you remember Michael Flynn, who was Donald Trump's national security advisor? That guy was a Pentagon general, an ex-lieutenant general. And Michael Flynn was somebody who said we ought to team up with Russia to fight against the Islamic extremists and terrorists and ISIS, right? And he was somebody who was more anti-war because he was from the Pentagon. So there are divisions in the ruling class. There are divisions within the military apparatus. There are divisions within the deep state. Tulsi Gabbard represents, she's like the most vocal, voice of a good faction, of a faction that's tied in with the Pentagon. It's got deep roots in the Pentagon, but wants to stop the wars. So the idea that Tulsi Gabbard might, be listening to what I'm saying, might be reading what I write, I think that's very possible. I think it's very, very possible, and it's very good. And it's not something I should completely dismiss. I've said many times, I feel like we're the velvet underground of politics in America, right? That's really what we are. Because, and I've made this analogy before, but if you haven't ever heard of them, there was a rock band during the 1960s called the Velvet Underground. And it was started by people who worked with the painter, the guy who did the soup cans. What's his name? What's his name? The soup can guy. This avant-garde artist in New York City, the soup labels guy. I can't remember his name. Andy Warhol, right? He was this avant-garde artist. He did pop art or whatever. And he brought together this German fashion model named Nico and a guitarist named Lou Reed. And they started a band called the Velvet Underground. And Velvet Underground was never super famous. They weren't like the Beatles. They weren't like the Rolling Stones. They were a not so well-known band. However, they were a huge influence on the Beatles, a huge influence on the Rolling Stones, a huge influence on much bigger rock and roll names, because they did experimental rock and roll. That's what they were famous for. In their music, they did things that had not been done before. And the Beatles, the Rolling Stones would listen to it. And people directly linked the Rolling Stones. The Beatles were very open about the fact they listened to the Velvet Underground. And the Velvet Underground would do things that hadn't been done before. They would experiment. And the kind of things that they would do, they tried it out first to see if it worked. And if it worked, then the Beatles might start doing it, right? And that, when people are really, big record companies, the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, they can't afford to take too many risks, because if they do, they could lose a lot of money. Whereas a lower level band like the Velvet Underground, they could take risks. They could do things that hadn't been done before. They could engage in more experimental music, etc., because it wasn't as big of a risk. So they blazed trail. And that's really what we're doing with the Center for Political Innovation. We are blazing trail We are doing things in politics that have never been done before. I mean, it's not that they've never been done before, but we're breaking the rules. We're engaging in political innovation. We are breaking out of the standard discourse. We are trying to get out of the movement to the masses. And a lot of the ideas that we first floated on these streams, like the synthetic left, calling out the synthetic left, and the fact that the CIA manipulates and controls the left. I mean, first Ben Norton started using the term synthetic left, and then, other people started using it, and it really caught on. Patriotic socialism, socialism with American characteristics. Again, it started out as just us, and then it caught on. And a lot of the things that we do here have had a deeper impact. I mean, I have directly impacted people for in the Marxist world that you would never even guess, right? And that we are blazing trail. So the fact that Tulsi Gabbard might have some, might be influenced by us in some way, might be hearing what we say on these streams and be influenced by it, that's not impossible to me at all. I think that's very, very, very possible. So I actually appreciate what Trevor Loudon had to say. I will say this though. Trevor Loudon's a nut. He's a nut. Trevor Loudon, he made this documentary in 2017 that said that I was like leading the Stop Trump protest movement, right? And because I worked with Press TV and RT, that proved that like the Stop Trump protest movements were a Russian and Iranian conspiracy. At the time, I actually had denounced the Stop Trump protest movement. Was out of the Workers' World Party, and I was being attacked and castigated. The whole synthetic left, the whole Stop Trump movement was all going after me during those times. So Trevor Loudon made this stupid documentary, trying to say that like the Stop Trump protest movements were a foreign conspiracy because Caleb Maupin, it's just that he's a nut. He's a nut. So, anything he says, I would take with a grain of salt. I would really, really take with a grain of salt. He also made a documentary, catch this, called Soviet Islam. Soviet Islam. And it was arguing that Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Islamic terrorism was all started by the Soviet Union. It was so bad historically. I mean, this film, you can look it up, Soviet Islam. It was the stupidest thing I'd ever seen. The image on the cover is Saddam Hussein shaking hands with Brezhnev. And it's like, aha. But it's like Saddam Hussein was a secular Arab nationalist, you fucking idiot. Like, it's all based on the fact that the KGB had one meeting with the Muslim Brotherhood or something. And it's like, everyone knows that Islamic extremism, Wahhabism was being used by the United States against the Soviet Union. That's like one of the most well-documented facts in Afghanistan and, in Syria and in Iraq and, place after place after place. The communists were aligning with the secular Arab nationalists, and Islamic extremism, Wahhabism, was being used by the U.S. imperialists. But that's just how much of a doofus he is, Trevor Loudon. So Trevor Loudon's not someone you could take seriously. Every so often he name drops me and gets something amazingly wrong. He wrote an article saying that I was part of the League of Revolutionaries for a New America. I've never been part of the League of Revolutionaries. I've never had anything to do with that organization. I like Nelson Peary's writings. I really encourage people to read The Future is Up to Us because it's a very good economic analysis of capitalism. And it's really one of the only texts where they're talking about the falling rate of profit and overproduction and the computer revolution and how it necessitates socialism. So I recommend people read Nelson Peary. I have absolutely nothing to do with the League of Revolutionaries for a New America. Nothing to do with it. It's Trevor Loudon. He gets things amazingly wrong. But in this instance where he's saying that Tulsi Gabbard has ties or is influenced somehow by the Center for Political Innovation and Caleb Maupin, I'll take it. I think there's actually a good chance that that's the case. My book on Kamala Harris, where I explained why Tulsi Gabbard went out of her way to go after Kamala Harris and the differences within the deep state. I think she probably read that. I would assume she did. Why wouldn't she? If Kamala Harris's staff is reading it, why wouldn't she read it? So, I think it's very possible, but I don't know of any direct influence that we've had other than I asked her a question at an event one time when I was a reporter, and that was the only time I've ever interacted with her, but who knows? Maybe Trevor knows something we don't know. right? Don't rule it out. Maybe he and his buddies at Epoch Times know something. They've talked to people with Tulsi Gabbard and they know something that we do not know, right? So there you go.